Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm Vinny Costa, editor of Street Muscle Magazine, and your host of the RodCAST, the all-encompassing car show where we talk about all things automotive. Today, I'm joined by my co-host, Greg Acosta, editor of Engine Labs and all-around tech guru. What's up, Greg?
Hey, how you doing, Vinny?
I'm good, man. I'm good. It's Thursday evening, and I'm excited to get this episode going, dude. This is going to be a really, really great episode.
Yes,
I think everybody's. If you've already read the title, you've clicked on the link, then you already know who's on the episode. But I got to do my intro spiel anyways. So, Greg, today we got a very special guest and a very special episode. This one's kind of a more serious episode, though, because it's about something both of us take seriously, and it was actually inspired by some recent headlines we read, and we immediately thought of the same person to have on. We've kind of been saving this guest for something poignant like this. Without further ado, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find another individual in any arena, any sector, automotive or otherwise, who is respected, liked, and revered by their peers as this man. He's held the title of editor of CarCraft, Popular Hot Rodding, and Hot Rod. He's made a substantial name for himself as the go-to tech guy. I mean, this guy is the guy that other authorities call to check their work. What more can I say about the man most of you already know, or most of you definitely should know? I'm referring to the great and powerful Jeff Smith. What's going on, Jeff?
Slight correction, not Popular Hot Rodding, but Chevy High Performance.
Excuse me. Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's all right. That was an Argus title.
Okay.
Back in the day, they were the enemy. So, yeah.
Oh, my mistake.
Sorry. In the old days, Pete Pestero, he was the editor of PHR when I was editor at CarCraft.
See, we're 2 minutes into the episode. You're already fact checking me, Jeff.
Well, in the interest of full disclosure and accuracy and everything else. So.
Well, I appreciate that.
As you stated, journalistic integrity, right?
That's right.
Don't want to correct you, but I want the record to be correct.
I appreciate that. And yes, you are correct, Jeff. That is what this episode is about. Journalistic integrity, specifically in the modern age. I have a lot of questions. This is going to be a long conversation. So everybody who's watching at home, buckle up. Jeff is the man, and he's going to answer some of these questions for you. And Greg and I will kind of comment. But first, I'd like to ask Jeff, after having such a lengthy and prolific career in the automotive media, I'd like to start by defining some terms and roles for you. What has been your guiding light in terms of journalism? What does a journalist owe their audience, and what responsibility do we have to our readers?
Oh, wow. Okay. Good to dive right into it. When I was about 10 years old, I started reading Hot Rod. 14 years old, started reading Hot Rod and CarCraft magazine. And it right away, especially CarCraft, really spoke to me. It was like they were talking to me. And there was this trust that occurred. And it was never a conscious decision. It was like one morning woke up and said, okay, this is the way I have to approach it. It was just always accepted. And that, and the scary part was when I went to Iowa State, got my degree in journalism. And then when I got my job at CarCraft, it was like, oh my God, there's going to be hundreds of thousands of people that are going to read what I write. This has got to be right. And it's got to be accurate. And I need to be honest. And if we break something, I'm going to tell you we broke it, and here's how it broke so that because obviously I just finished a book about the Apollo program and how much they learned from their failures. You don't learn as much from your wins, your successes, because everything went right. It's what you learn from your failures. So,
well, and real quick to touch on something, you mentioned Apollo. Tesla recently, obviously we've been watching, SpaceX and all that, and Elon Musk has the just the mindset of, we'll test to destruction. And that's because, just like you said, you don't learn from successes. You do.
You do, but not nearly as much as you learn. Because the success, oftentimes you get away with something. It's like building engines, and I, having done something wrong for 40 years, 35 years, and then realizing one day, oh my God, I've been doing this wrong the whole time. Did I get away with it? Yes. Was it correct? No. So there was the learning point right there. So the integrity part just comes from well, first of all, I always approached it from the standpoint of I'm going to be here. I'm approaching this as if I'm going to be here for 40 years. Never really believing that would really be the case, because when you're, what was I, 27 years old, it's like 40 years from now, oh my God, no, that's insane.
Is that when you made editor title, Jeff? 27?
Well, no, because it would have been, I started in 79 and I was 25. So I made editor within 4 years. So I guess I was, yeah.
That's awesome.
So, yeah. And right away it was like, you're one of the youngest editors ever. So right away, we can't believe anything you said.
Well,
and being in meetings with company people, they were like, who's this kid? It's like, well, he's the new editor of CarCraft. And of course, they've all gotten older, and the editors now are looking like they're right out of high school. And that's
I know what that's like. Yeah.
So that was a burden that you had to overcome, and essentially did that by being successful. So it was oh my God, a lot of long nights, because now everything's done digitally. So I can shoot a photo and instantly have that image on my computer. Whereas back in, the Stone Age, we were literally still writing on typewriters and shooting with film and waiting 2 or 3 days to get the film processed.
Well, I think there's something to that, and I want to touch on it. That instant gratification maybe inspires some misinformation.
Yes.
And I do want to get into that, but I'm curious. In those early days, was there anybody that you looked up to or that you worked with that maybe showed you the ropes early on and said, this is how you do it, this is how you conduct honest journalism?
Yeah. My first editor was Rick Vogelin. Took a chance on me. Interestingly enough, there came down to 2 guys that were going to fill the position. Al Kirschenbaum left CarCraft. This is 1979 to go work for Hot Rod. And there's a whole long story about how I found out about it. I won't get into that, but because it's a long, convoluted story in order to give everyone credit. But so it came down to Cam Benty and I. And Cam Benty actually replaced me as editor at CarCraft when I went to Hot Rod. But so his career and mine have done this for literally 40 years. It's amazing. We still do things together occasionally. But Rick Vogelin was my first editor, and his classic line I use it all the time. I've probably told you guys this line. Doctors bury their mistakes. We publish ours. And so what happened, and the point of that is, don't do that if you can at all. So be careful with what you write. So as the young guy there, that was heaped on me very, very quickly, that you got to be fast and you got to be accurate. And that's even harder now because of the quick turnaround. But we had, sort of safety nets, in the print deal, because and most of those safety nets are now gone. In terms of just to give you a quick outline, I think we counted it up. It's about, so I would write a story, and literally for CarCraft magazine back in the print days, and this is true at Hot Rod too, and even Chevy High, it would get read somewhere around 12 to 14 times before it got into print. And we still had errors, but, misspellings, typographical errors, things like that. And now oftentimes it gets read, 2 or 3 times, so as a freelancer, I know now that I need to give you guys something, or any of my editors, as clean a copy as possible, because I know digitally I could give it to you on a Tuesday and it could be up online by Thursday. And so, which is shocking to me, because in the old days it was 3 months, and somebody would say, well, I just read your current story. Well, which one is that? Because I'm working on January, and you're reading, November, or October. So it's like ancient history.
Well, so that's kind of your guiding light, right? To be accurate and timely, but not compromising the information.
Yeah.
How have you seen the automotive journalistic landscape change from, over those 40 years till now. And, I'm curious, were there a lot of unscrupulous things going on back then as well? Or is that just something that we're kind of seeing now?
No, it was just, I think, to be honest, they were probably just better hidden back then. But we would get things like, the publisher would make a deal with an advertiser, he's going to buy 12 ads for an entire year. And that's where the whole concept of the purchased editorial content comes in, because then we had to find a way to do editorial around a deal that our publisher made. And that's where the battles come in between the editor and the publisher. And I saw those battles that they were, some of these were vicious. Screaming matches, where I thought there's going to be a fist fight here any second. And, because when Rick Vogelin left right after, I don't think there's any connection here, but he left right after he hired me. And then John Asher became the editor. So John was really my editor for the 4 years of my whole learning experience. And another guy I want to give credit to for my early indoctrination into the publishing thing was Jim McFarlane. I don't know if you know who he is. He was editor of Hot Rod in 1968. I think he was editor for about 4 years of Hot Rod in the late 60s. He was the editor of Hot Rod when they did their 20th anniversary issue. I was the editor of Hot Rod when we did our 40th anniversary issue. And Jim was the senior VP at Edelbrock, basically in product development. And so he became my tech guy, go-to guy. And we literally started something that I called the Edelbrock Friday Afternoon Club, where I would call him with a question, and he would say, I'll tell you what, do me a favor, save your questions up, come down here to the office on Friday afternoon. It's kind of quiet down here. We'll run 2 shifts on Friday. It'll be nice and quiet. The phone won't ring, and we can go over all your questions. And I would get down there about 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. Oftentimes, I would not get home till 9 o'clock that night, because I lived in the San Fernando Valley, probably about a 45-minute drive home. And I'm sure that my ex-wife probably thought I was having an affair every Friday night, because that's where I was for, probably not every Friday, but, many, many, many Friday nights. And Jim took the time to spend time with me.
I'm curious, what were you driving, making that 45 minutes?
My 66 big block Chevelle with a small block in it, because I'd already grenaded the rat motor by that time. So, nice. Yeah. In fact, the first performer package, which was Edelbrock did, which was a dual plane intake manifold and a very mild camshaft, the 2101 intake manifold, and I think the part number was the 2102 camshaft package. When they first did a combo package, the very first editorial was done on my Chevelle, and we stuck it in a 283. That was actually a 287 of 30 over 283. That's all I could afford. They were paying us pennies back then to start. And so I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Burbank, until I bought our first house. But yeah. Well, so
that actually ties in nicely into my next question, because it shows how much of an enthusiast you were even back then, and to carry that around for 40 years, it really speaks volumes. So my question is, you can train an enthusiast to write. You went to journalism school, but you can take an enthusiast and you can train them to write. Mm-hmm. But can you teach a writer to be an enthusiast?
No. You have to be an enthusiast. You really do. We tried that. We hired a couple of people at the time. It was actually before I was editor, when John Asher was there. Hired a couple of guys who were very good writers, but they could get close, but they just couldn't really. You could read into it that they didn't really understand.
Interesting how you have that ability. Like, if you're an enthusiast, you just have that innate ability to kind of sniff somebody out
you can pick it right out. So if there's somebody that, okay, you're close, but you're not there. And it's much easier, frankly, to take someone who is an enthusiast and then just fine tune his ability to write. He's got to have writing ability. If he doesn't, he's just going to be lost.
Right.
But, well, I think I won't use any names, but when John Diana made me the editor at CarCraft, we were already one staffer down. So by elevating me to the editor position, we were actually going to be 2 staffers down. I said, I'm not doing this. I'm not going to take the job with 2 open positions. It'll be a nightmare to try and run this book. So I said, you got to hire 2 guys, right, before I'll take the job. And I didn't realize what he was doing. So he just hired the first 2 warm bodies that even looked like they were at all interested. And one of these poor guys was so not equipped. He was a good photographer, a very good photographer, but he couldn't write. And to the extent that one day I went in and I said, look, you used the same word in 2 sentences 3 times. You just can't do that. You need to use a thesaurus. And I got this, what? I said, like a thesaurus, like this, right here. Roger Webster's thesaurus, right? And he had no idea what I was talking about. So I went in my office, grabbed my thesaurus, and gave it to him. Said, here. He said, well, how's this work? Oh, God. So I thought that right then, this is not going to work. So we parted ways,
Yeah, I
and
can
then
imagine
you
why.
start to build your own team. And so, yes, you've got to have people with some writing ability.
The reason I asked
this happened several times where I essentially trained guys, and the good ones would, they pick it up real fast and show them how to shoot photos and pick it up real fast. And then it's like, okay, put your track shoes on. Here we go. And it was fun. It was actually fun to see them evolve and become really very good,
Well, the reason I asked, Jeff, is because, if someone's not an enthusiast, but they're writing about, our culture, I wonder, would that lead them to be careless with what they write or publish? Like, they have no skin in the game, right? They don't owe a debt of gratitude to the culture that they're writing about.
Yes, I think you're absolutely correct. I see it more as not necessarily peer pressure, but people ask me all the time, says, what's the pressure like writing for all these thousands of people? And I said, well, the reality is I'm really writing for about 12 to 24 people, because they're not that no one else's opinion matters. Everyone's opinion matters, but these people, these are my peers, or these are the people that I looked up to. And these guys, when they see something and went, oh boy, missed the mark on that one. It's like, ooh, that hurts and I want to know why, it's like, okay, what exactly did I do wrong? Because they'll dance around it sometimes, but right when I became editor, a guy named Jim McCraw, who had been editor of Hot Rod for about 6 months, he was too nice a guy. And part of becoming an editor at a title is having a thick skin and saying, no, this is the way we're going to do it. You don't like it? Well, I'm sorry, but you're still going to do it, and you have to take the risk that if you've got people that just don't agree with you, it's like, well, maybe you should look for another job. But he went to work, then he left Hot Rod and went to work for Motor Trend. And when I became editor, he just started doing this on his own. So when the title would come in, because like you get all the titles at Peterson back then, and he would literally go through my issue and redline stuff and circle things and make comments, and then just stick it in an inner office envelope and send it to me. And these were harsh, because he took the red pencil to my magazine, and said, why did you do this? Circled the word and said, I think the term was a unique situation, and he circled that and said, this is not unique. Shouldn't use this word because it's not unique. And typical, the first time he did it, I was offended, right? And I thought, but then I realized, no, that's not his intention. His intention is not to step on me. It's to educate me. It's to make me a better editor, and that will take the whole quality level and just raise it up. And once I realized that, then it was like, okay, I just have to set my ego aside and be able to accept that criticism and immediately send it, called him on the phone and just said, hey, this is, thank you. Because it takes time to do that. I probably spent an hour or so with my book. And it was like, yikes, because every mistake in there I had to own, because my name was at the top of the title.
100%. I think that's you hit the nail on the head, Jeff. It's every writer, whether you write novels or you write articles, what have you, every writer has an ego. I don't really care who you are, right? And so
you have to have
if you feel that your words are prolific enough for someone to want to read and educate themselves with, you have to have an ego. So that's the first step, kind of setting that aside and letting someone rip your work to shreds and saying thank you.
I can actually remember an instance it was a pretty big light bulb moment in my career. It was actually with Jeff. You had submitted something and you just had a really minor math error, just something really stupid, really dumb. And I'm sitting there sweating bullets, and I'm like, and I'm sitting there like, oh dear God, I've got to correct Jeff Smith.
Yeah,
I don't know what to do.
Oh no!
And I said something to you, and you the way you responded was just oh yeah, oops, no, you're right,
you're right.
And that was and that was you didn't have any ego about it, because I was seriously stressed. It took me 2 hours to draft a 15-word email. It was
my guess is it was probably something to do with area versus circumference. I have made that mistake so many times. There's this mental block in there. I understand them, when someone says "you moron," and that goes back to the idea of having 12 or 14 pairs of eyes read it. Someone's going to go, wait a minute, that's not circumference, that's area, or vice versa. And hopefully someone catches it. We all have these little areas that you get blocked in on. And I had a copy editor one time ask me, were you a math major in college? I went, oh my God, no. It's I wanted to be an engineer. When I was in junior high, I thought I could be an engineer. I wanted to design cars. That's what I really wanted to do, and discovered very quickly that math was just not going to happen.
Same.
So it was but the writing part was easy. It's well, okay, so how do we do that? How do we use the writing part and build cars? Well, it evolved into, car magazine. And
I'm curious. I kind of want to use that to segue here. You're talking about having all these eyes on each piece, and being able to have that thick skin to take these corrections. And it's difficult because it's my own generation that I kind of want to comment on here. And it's something that I've had to unlearn, right? But there's a sort of sensitivity that exists there that I think maybe didn't exist before. And so people are less apt to take criticism well. And then coupled with the fact that they're trying to churn things out and be the first one, to publish a story rather than the first person to get it right.
Yeah.
What role do you see that playing in what's being published right now?
Well, I think there's kind of two tiers to that whole thing. A lot of it probably is just a lack of experience. They want to jump in and they think they have something here that's useful information. Let's jump in there and get it done, not realizing that there's something else to it, and you need to double check that. And so I've learned to take two completely different sources to try and confirm my information. And if I can't get it, I have to leave it out. I just have to leave it. And there's going to be a hole, and you acknowledge the hole. You say, there's a chunk there that's missing. Yes, because we don't know what that is. I can't find it. And, especially if you're under deadline to get it done. I just did a piece on, everything you want to know about the Gen 5 LT engines. And there were holes in that story, and I acknowledged them because it's I don't know what this is. So we have to let, hopefully we can get this information at a later date. And then the people, the contacts that I had said, yeah, we don't know either. People you would think would know. So I think there's part of it. And then the second tier, which is the people that should know better. Maybe the first tier, they just don't have enough experience yet to realize that they're making, they're assuming some things that they don't realize. It's kind of I don't know what I don't know. Well, how do you there's no way to fix that. other than diving in and making the mistake and going, okay, now I know, but I didn't know then.
Well, Jeff, I'll ask you about a specific example, and you don't have to comment on it, but I think you have commented on it, like on your social, and that's one that was recent, and it was published by Motor Trend, and it was the C8, the Corvette thing. You know exactly what I'm talking about. For our viewers at home, can you kind of tell them what happened and where you think something fell through?
May not get all the details right, but it was was it the C8?
Yep.
Yeah, and they
put dyno numbers initial.
Yeah, they put chassis dyno numbers up, and I think they said, well, based on this rear wheel horsepower number, that means that the engine, the flywheel horsepower, is something like 660 or something like that. It was a crazy number,
right?
And it was like, no, that's not even close to being right, because having built enough engines, you run the math in your head and go, sure, that's a race motor,
right?
At best, that's a race motor. I don't know. No, it's not possible. And so I don't know to this day. So I'm going to assume that they didn't know what they didn't know. The assumptions that they made was I think the friction loss within the transaxle.
Right.
And there are some unknowns in there that I don't know about because of how that transaxle works. It actually sent me off for about a half a day looking into that, because it's like they're listing a ratio here that I don't understand. So frankly, I don't want to comment on that because I don't know enough about it.
Right.
You say something incorrect. But the net result was, and then what it turned out was late, and I give them credit. They came back and said, okay, we figured out what we did wrong. And it was a 4-wheel chassis dyno, but they were only running the rear wheels. And so the dyno then assumed that you were driving all 4 for some reason. And I think that's what happened. So, but they were quick to jump to it. And it's like, man, if you have some experience, that's a crazy number. Or call somebody and say, what do you think? And they would have said, because quite frankly, even Chevrolet would have said, no.
Well, the Chevrolet did say that. I mean, that number was quite inflated from what the reported number from Chevrolet Performance was.
Sure.
And so that was like the first red flag. Everyone was like, wait, hold on a second.
There's something wrong here. And they should have, you would assume someone writing for Motor Trend has some experience. I don't know that particular gentleman that wrote that piece, but it's like, yeah, you should have known, and or at least you should have checked with someone who does know. And they oh, dude, time out. That your numbers are way off.
Yeah, and then like you, I kind of was like, oh well, I'll give them credit. They issued this kind of retraction, but within the first couple of lines, they were quick to blame the dyno operator for him making an error. And, I'm not going to lambast this person, whoever wrote the articles or the retraction, but it just seemed odd to me. And, it speaks to that, is it, I've got to be first instead of I got to be right?
Yeah, I think it was probably a combination of, hey, look at serious numbers here. This is cool. We should just jump on that. And I've fell victim to that from times where I'll say, hey, I'm going to jump on this because this looks really cool. And then you start diving into it and realize, well, no, there's something not right here. Like I remember I think I was doing a valve deflection test and was seeing some crazy numbers where I'm seeing like all this loss of lift. And it might have been a story I did for you, Greg, that, and then realized my testing was an error, that my dial indicator on the valve, what happened was the retainer was kind of shaped like this, and my dial indicator was sliding off the retainer and it was giving me all these crazy numbers. And, so as usual, it was self-inflicted. So, I had to go back and start over. And then
but that's the mark of experience and integrity.
And saying, okay, there's something not right here because two things. A, the numbers didn't seem right. And B, they weren't consistent. That was it was like every time I'm getting a different number, it's only a couple thousandths, but no, this should be repeatable. And so I started off thinking I got to make it repeatable. And then I realized so I ended up changing retainers, put a different retainer on it that was certain flat, and then all the stuff came in. So, Yeah, because you're looking for a hero number. You're looking for a hero story. Everybody wants that story. You know, everybody wants to be Woodard and Bernstein, and
exactly.
you know, and oftentimes you discover, well, it's not quite as good as I thought it was.
Well, you sort of inadvertently just answered another question of mine, and that's you know, obviously the person who published the story, they were like, "Holy hell! I just discovered something that I got to show everyone."
Yeah.
But in other situations, we see journalists craft crafty titles that are somewhat misleading, right? So my question is clickbait a new phenomena, or does it just have a new name?
Well, we were always looking for that, you know, for that great, you know, cover blurb that was gonna, you know, it was, you know, the classic one of all time is free horsepower. That was the one we always tried to pull off, and it was never free. It was never free. So, and after a while, it's like, I just can't do that, because that's essentially the magazine version of clickbait. So yes, it's not nothing new. It's just, I think, far more prevalent now. You know, where getting to the point now where it's like, well, I know that this is not what I'm going to get. You know, and I'm not gonna go there for just that reason. It's unfortunate though for younger readers who don't have the experience. It's like, yeah, they're going to get sucked in, and you know, it's kind of like a story where you say, hey, here's some free horsepower. Put an aluminum flywheel on your engine, and bam, you might pick up 10, 15 foot-pounds of torque, because now the engine can, or actually horsepower, because you can accelerate the engine quicker, and a car is going to be quicker. You can equate that to some sort of free horsepower number. Well, yes, that's true, but you got to tell the other side of the story, which is, it's going to be impossible to drive, you know, on the street, because you've lost all that inertia, you know, and so it's like trying to drive. A friend of mine a few years ago bought essentially like a Winston West tourer car, you know, road race car, with a flex plate for a flywheel and a 7-inch clutch, and I had to learn how to drive it, you know, with this big camshaft, and luckily it had gear ratio in it. But if you ever watch IndyCar racing, or even the NASCAR guys, they all do it. They all have the same components, super light soy stuff. You have to spin the tires to leave the pits. Otherwise, you're going to kill the engine. You see that happen in IndyCar races all the time. Indy 500, you know, boom, you know, then they refire the motor up, costs them, you know, 30 seconds. And you think, well, the driver was an idiot. Well, no, it's really hard. You know, it's a methanol engine. It's very peaky. It's very tiny. And you got a clutch that is probably 5 inches diameter that weighs nothing. And it's really hard to drive, especially leaving the pits. So that's why they always spin the tires, you know, because that's the easy way out of things. So it's kind of that example.
Well, I hope to have that problem someday. That'd be fun. But you know, well, you know, back to the original question, Jeff. At what point do those hyperbolic or you know, abstract article titles become misleading or unethical, and where do you draw that line between attention grabbing and worthwhile?
And it's a fine line. It's a fine line. I really can't come up with a.
Do you think if you don't follow up on the backside, like you mentioned, if you don't give that other piece of information, then it becomes,
you know, it's less dangerous, shall we say, if you say free horsepower and, you know, the whole aluminum flywheel thing, but then at least explain the downside to it, and then because that's my contention with all news today. You know, don't do my thinking for me. In other words, give me both sides of the issue, and then allow me to make the decision, you know? So in that analogy would be, we'll tell you, yeah, lightweight flywheel, but, you know, it's going to be impossible to drive. But if you can put up with that, then, or your car only weighs, you know, 2,200 pounds, then you could probably get away with it. You know,
and that rolls right back into that original question that I asked you about our duty to the reader. And I guess that's probably it, right? To toe that line.
Yeah, because if you're just intentionally misleading them, especially if it's to the benefit of an advertiser, oof, you know. And what happens is, yeah, you can do it. Is there a law against it? No, but you then get those readers that say, oh, well, they just paid for that. The company just paid for that story. And if you talk to the manufacturers who understand, and that could be a very large company, it could be also a very small company. If they really care, they don't want you to do those kinds of stories. They would much rather have you do an accurate story, and then the results are what they are.
Well, can you touch on that a little bit more, Jeff? Like, how has that changed? Where do ad sales actually fall in all of this? You got clicks and article read metrics versus previously magazine sales, and seeing them on the newsstand. How has that changed?
A lot of it, I think, has to do with the people at the title, at the magazine or the website or whatever it is. The example I can give you is back when Peterson was sold to EMAP, the English firm. And so they brought in, of course, their upper tier management, and then eventually wanted to do these redesigns and everything. And I was the editor of Chevy High at the time, and worked with this gentleman. I've forgotten his name now. Unfortunately, I apologize. But and he said, I have a question for you guys. It was Jim Adolph was my publisher. And so just to kind of set the tone for this thing, or set the stage, the publisher's job at that time, and pretty much till today, is to sell he's overall in charge of the entire magazine, but his job really is to sell the advertising, manage the advertising package. The editor's job, he works for the publisher. His job was to do the editorial side. And if it was a good relationship, those things would overlap seamlessly. And but if it was an adversarial relationship, it was ugly. So gentleman comes in and we're having this meeting, and we were talking about something, and he said, "Can I ask you a question?" Sure. And he said, "I've noticed this interaction that you have with your, he was actually talking to my publisher. He said, between you and Jeff, and it operates almost totally the opposite of several other titles at this company." Okay, so what's the problem? He goes, well, it appears that when it comes to the editorial stuff, he's talking to my publisher. He said, you just let him do what he wants. And Jim said, yeah, that's exactly how we operate, because I'm not going to dictate to him. And he says, well, but these other publishers seem to have this concept that they should dictate to the editor what should be in the magazine, because they're coming at it from the business side. And Jim said, well, in our case, what we do is, he said, what I do is I let Jeff run the book and I sell around that.
Right.
And it's incredibly easy because our editorial is so strong and we have a good, strong following, and we're true to our readership. The advertisers pick up on that real fast and said, that's the title we want to be at, because we're using the products and we're attracting a readership that buys product. We don't care about, well, I should say we don't care. We pay less attention to the 12 or 14-year-old kid who's just getting started. He can barely afford to buy the magazine. It takes his whole week's allowance to buy the magazine, so he doesn't have a lot of money. But we want to cultivate him because he's going to be someone who's going to buy the product when he's 20 years old. He's got spendable income. And so you start laying the groundwork for those guys, but you're aiming at the guys who are buying product. And those guys, you're not going to fool them. You might fool them once, but you'll never fool them twice. And if you fool them enough times, they'll just go away and never come back. And so the idea is, we're in this for the long term. We're in this for the long run. And we want you to trust what we're telling you, and that's hard sometimes. So
how do you get around that perceived bias when sponsors provide or clients provide parts? What responsibility at that point does the journalist have to the audience versus that sponsor? Yeah,
well, I think the key to that is to choose the parts carefully. Don't just here's some free parts. No, because too much of that stuff is just. I won't mention the manufacturer's name, but they came after me real hard about 9 months ago. You want this, something that was worth probably $5,000 or $6,000, just do something on it. And they wanted me to come out to their facility, essentially get in bed with them. And it's like, I can't do that, because essentially this is all stuff made overseas. It's a lot of the stuff is copies of existing components where you just bought that guy's product, shipped it over there, they copied it, and then sent it back. I'll give you another example. I did a story one time on the other guy's intake manifolds beyond Holly and Edelbrock. This is when I was at Chevy High, I think. And this is long enough ago. Vic Edelbrock's still alive. Called me up on the phone and just read me the riot act. He said, half this stuff is made in China, which I guess I should have known. And that's where it's like, you don't know what you don't know. But I should have known had I bothered to really look at where these were coming from. And he said, our stuff is made in America, and you should do that. And it's like, okay, I'm not going to do the exclusion to that other stuff just because it's inexpensive. But and unfortunately, what was happening was a few of those manifolds were direct ripoffs of his product. I mean, they were so obviously copied. It was amazing. Performance is right there. Well, sure, because did they do any research? No. The only research was buy an Edelbrock manifold, take it to the casting company and say, make this, just leave the Edelbrock name off.
So
and that's the tough part, because then people say, yeah, but it's $100 cheaper. It's like, or whatever it is, $50 cheaper. Yeah. Oh, well, I can't argue with you, but if you take that to its illogical extreme, in another couple of decades, there won't be any research and development and new product development going on here, because no one will do it, because all it's going to do is get ripped off. So therein lies the dilemma.
Yeah, that's the rub for sure, because you owe your readers the informative.
Some young kid is right now thinking, I can't afford that stuff, so I'll buy. It's like, well, I get it, I understand, because I was there. I can saving every nickel and dime I could to put into my big block Chevelle when I was in high school. And my mom called it my gold-plated car, because every nickel, except for the money I had to save for my house, for my car payment and my insurance payment, every nickel I made went into that car. And, well,
it's got to be very tempting, especially because online merchants are so prevalent now, and so it's so easy to purchase those parts. They're, speed shops don't exist anymore, and they probably were more selective about the variety of parts that they carried. So I guess that, it's a balance.
So the alternative to that, just to kind of toss this out, is because I'm seeing more and more of this, where it's it is a quality product, but it's not the brand, but you're buying it from a retailer that, and I don't want to use names because I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but it's it's like a U.S. company made this product, and they're selling it through this retailer. I think you kind of figure out who I'm talking about, and it's good stuff, and it's less money.
Right.
It's like, I actually called them and I said, this looks like these guys' part, and they said, well, I'm really not at liberty to comment on that. And then my friend, who I had asked that question because we were using his company's email, called me back on his private phone and said, I want to tell you the truth, I just couldn't do it through the company line. He said, yeah, you're right. It's like, okay, I'm never going to use it. I don't want to embarrass you, and I don't want to create a problem that could cause a rift between that U.S. made company and what you're selling, that people think are actually offshore, but they're not. So there's the other side of it, So what this comes down to is, and all of this fits right into what we're talking about, is the informed reader. So if we as editors and people who create the material can educate the readers by kind of reading between the lines, because I can't tell you, well, this, it is a quality product, although we wouldn't be using it, but it's not an offshore piece. That it's the education process, and that's what I like to do, because it's like when I go into an area that I don't know anything about, I don't know, electronics, or Okay, Greg, firearms. I know so little, but and there, I know that there are people making junk stuff and there are people making high quality stuff. And I need to become that informed buyer so that I purchase the correct parts. I can walk that minefield in the automotive field. Probably should use a different analogy, but from a firearm standpoint, I have to really be careful. Because I don't know that much, I know just enough to be really dangerous.
So yeah, as journalists, then we have some responsibility, but the reader also has some responsibility, and so does the manufacturer.
Yeah,
I like it.
And so people say, why do you keep working with the same company all the time? Because I trust them, and I know that I have a good rapport with them. So if I have a problem, I can talk to them and say, this is what I found. What do you think? And then sometimes they'll go, yeah, we should probably change that.
Well, you and I were talking about this just the other day. Sometimes you work with a company and they inadvertently have you sort of doing their pseudo R&D for them. Yeah.
Yeah. That back when I was working for the magazine, when you're on salary, I could do some of that for them, and they took advantage of it, and I let them take advantage of it. I just can't afford to do that now, because the time is just too valuable. But yeah, and that comes from that relationship. There used to be an old AT&T commercial that said the most important business calls are personal. Absolutely 100% true, where you establish that personal relationship with someone, and then there's a level of trust there, and it's wonderful because then you don't have to worry about, like Greg said earlier, it took him 15, 20 minutes to type up that memo to me. It's like, no, dude, just call me. It's okay.
Well, that's the goal, to eventually get to that point with everyone you work with, right?
I'm not offended, and I want to make it right. If it's wrong, let's change it. Absolutely. Don't worry about it. So, and the quality manufacturers all will absolutely do the same thing. Yes, you found something wrong. I've also had companies that just go, it's the first we've heard of that. And it's like, come on, I know that that's not true. So don't offend me that way. Don't do that. But
Jeff, I want to shift gears here and ask you about when you were the editor. Which title were you editor of longest?
Probably Hot Rod. It was actually a little over 6 years.
Okay, so while you were editor of Hot Rod, what was it like to work in the office back then? Can you paint us a picture, like walk us through a typical day when you were at the height of your editorship?
It was Hot Rod magazine. We were at the corner of Sunset and La Cienega, right in the middle of Hollywood. In my office, the editor's office in Hot Rod looked out over Sunset Boulevard, so you saw all kinds of weird, crazy stuff. But had a staff. This will make you cringe. I probably had a staff of 13 people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That'd be nice.
I had my own secretary. How about that? It answered my phone. So my friends would call up every once in a while. And a buddy of mine, Chris Kaufman, Kaufman Products, and he was always a jokester. And one time, she sticks her head in my office and says, "Don Garlitz is on the phone for you."
Oh wow!
And she knew. Well, it was Chris Kaufman. So and so then it got to be a joke where every time it'd be a different celebrity. The Junior Johnson is on the phone. Yeah, right. So an art director and 2 assistant art directors, editor, managing editor, copy editor, 5 staffers, and then a receptionist for the office.
Yeah.
And basically I ran that whole operation. So there's a constant, people are in your office every 5 minutes. Gray Baskerville actually worked for me. That was probably Marlon Davis and Gray Baskerville worked for me. And I thought, my God, I can remember, Gray Baskerville, reading him forever. Somebody asked me one time, said, who are your two biggest influence as a writer? Oh, that's easy. Tom Wolfe The Right Stuff and Bonfires of the Vanities and all that other stuff, and the Purple Decades, and Gray Baskerville. This is when I was in college. And the professor said, I understand the first guy. Who's this guy? Gray Baskerville. Oh, he's a staff writer at Hot Rod Magazine. He makes up words. So it was a battle, but yet also, because a lot of egos, a lot of writers, a lot of creative people, they all want their own way, and you didn't always agree with everything they wanted to do, but the end result was always going to be good. It was always going to be great. And there was a competition within the writers to outdo each other. I want my story as the main cover theme. Or I want the banner blurred across the top. That's what I want. Or I want this, or I want that. Well, show me. Make it that good, and then we will. Or would walk in, and so it was really more about ideas. So when Joe Pettit walked into my office one day and said, "Hey, got this idea. Why don't we do a story on the 10 fastest streetcars in America?" I about fell out of my chair. Oh my God! Whatever it is you're working on, stop and do it right now. And what came out of that was Hot Rod's Fastest Streetcar of America test. The race we did at Memphis every year, and that evolved into its own organization. And I think maybe some ego there, but it's really Joe Pettit's is who gets the credit for it, as it was already happening, but we threw the 5 pounds of gasoline on the fire, and it just went poof like this, and turned into this amazing thing. And I have just a whole list of friends that came out of that whole thing. Kurt Urban and the list goes on and on. Of guys that I met through that deal.
So at that point, you were already in full swing of like a managerial role. Were you still able to, leave the office at times to go do, what had got you that position to begin with?
Fun stuff, yeah. I mean, you got to choose the plum stories. So but then conversely, Joe Pettit also came in and said, "Hey, how about I go ride right seat with Big Red at the Silver State?" It's like, yeah, go do that. A plum story, scary as hell, because he thought he was going to die several times.
Yeah, I bet.
So yeah, but it was so I tried to make it as fun as possible. It was a lot of work. It was you're talking 50, 60 hour work weeks as the norm. So you try and make it as fun as possible so that it didn't feel like work,
Right.
And that has its own cost too, because it's kind of like when my dad was in the Marine Corps. He was overseas a lot, always gone, and we basically grew up essentially without him. And my kids were kind of that, Dad was always somewhere else. My son thought I was a pilot for many years, because they were always taking me to the airport, and I was leaving, and I was getting on an airplane. So
is that the son who grew up to beat people up for a living?
Yes, he's a professional MMA fighter, Graham the Stalker Smith.
Yeah.
Where's my shirt? Here. We're gonna do a new one. I should get you guys a copy.
Yeah, please. That'd be awesome.
So there's. Let's see. I gotta make sure we get this right.
There you go.
There we go.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he's just turned pro, and he's a 1-0. He has another fight on 9/11. So
nice. Congratulations.
Going back to Iowa on in the middle of the month there, a couple days before, and hopefully he goes 2-0. Yeah,
that's awesome. Congratulations on that.
Brutal way to make a living, man. I'll tell you. He didn't get it from me, but he didn't get his size from me either. Thank God. So
yeah. Well, are you sure about that? I'm sure you've busted your knuckles quite a few times.
Oh yeah, fighting was never. I could never see a future in that.
Yeah, I don't like getting punched.
It's a mindset. I think where it came from. This is all way off topic, but real quickly, he played football, and I love team sports, but it's frustrating if you're giving 100% and somebody else isn't, or half the team isn't.
Definitely.
And you're never going to get anywhere. And I think I asked him that once, and he goes, well, it's really more just, and I said, because it looks to me like you just decided, okay, I'll go in the ring and it's all me. I'm either going to win or I'm going to lose, and it's all going to be on me. I can't blame anyone else. There is no one else to blame. That guy beat me, and he lost many fights as an amateur, some were brutal. 5 rounds of 3 minutes. Oh my God.
Jeez.
And fighting a guy that was about 3 inches taller and outweighed him by about 60 pounds. This guy was a street fighter. He was and he wouldn't go down.
No, thank you. I don't want any part of that.
Anyway, we're off topic.
But but actually we're kind of on topic, because you're talking about team sports. And as you were talking about your typical day-to-day when you were editor of Hot Rod, it sounded like you guys had this really cohesive teamwork.
Yes.
And I'm curious, and I'm not sure how much you can comment on that title particularly, but just from what you've seen within the industry, I'll ask, how has that changed? Do people not work with the editors and publishers in the same way? Are they not able to go into an editor's office and say, hey, I'd like to do this story, and then, are the bean counters stopping them? What's going on there?
A lot of it is just, and this can be a positive or a negative, but really a lot of it comes down to a lot of that pressure is placed on the editor, because he has to make that decision. And most good editors will immediately give you an answer. So you go walk into his office and say, got this great idea. And what I've learned, as having been the editor and then now working for someone, literally this happened to me. I'm, working for Doug Glad. I hired him into the company and I ended up working for him, which was fine, because after a while you just don't want to do the job anymore. It's a lot of pressure, and I could see the evolution of his decision-making process change as we worked together. And but you have to make that decision, and and I have to live with it if he says no. This is a great idea. So he says no, and it's like, that's the beauty of being a freelancer now, because I now work for half a dozen people. So if one editor doesn't want it, likely somebody else might.
Right.
So and I didn't realize that until I was no longer shackled by the one person, the bottleneck that it had to go through. But that was also true when I was the editor. I had a lot of people that said, this is a great job. This is a great story. You should let me do it. It's like, no, it's not going to fly. And there were probably times when I should have let that story happen. And then there are other stories that we did that I was really behind, and in retrospect, probably should not have done them. So, it works both ways. So.
Well, it's give and take, and I think more now we're seeing articles that are more focused on opinion. There's a lot of opinions out there instead of facts. And now we have this shift in content creation. I mean, hell, back then content creation wasn't even a phrase or a word.
Yeah.
Now we have people trying to think of the clickiest or stickiest title, in their office chairs, instead of going out and actually doing something like you're describing, exploring engineering that's involved with some of the tech that we love. I mean, I guess, that's more of a comment than a question, but, everyone has a voice. Has it improved the landscape as a whole, or has it just muddied the waters?
Oh, I think it has a lot to do with experience level. So if you have experience with this, that carries a lot of weight. If you don't, and you're still trying to carry that information through, it suffers, because you can't really walk the walk unless you've done it. So if you're out there wrenching on it, then you can say, well, you can try that if you want to, but it didn't work for me. Maybe you're smarter than I am, and if so, perfect. Let me know that it did work, and tell me what you did differently, because I tried, it didn't work. But it's really hard, especially in this industry, to pull that off if you're not out there at least trying it. It can be done, but you end up essentially getting stories written off a press release, which really isn't, Not good. I mean, not to say that press releases don't have a value. They do. It's how I learn about stuff. I get news releases all the time. Holly sends me, go, wow, I didn't even know you had that part. This is great stuff. So it has value, but then let's take it further. Let's take that idea and run with it and apply it. Preferably apply it in a way that they never thought about intending it to be used.
Right.
That's when it makes it fun, because you'll say, we're going to take this part and use it over here in a completely different way than what you intended, and it works. And that's when it makes it fun. That's really hard to do if you're not involved.
Jeff, I know that we talked earlier about right now this is relevant because we were talking about the difference between just opinion and then going out and finding factual evidence and research and things like that. I'm curious. I want to read a couple titles to you that I recently came across, and I won't say what publication they're from. I'll leave it to the viewer to Google them or whatever. But there's some that kind of stuck out to me, and I thought, is this journalism? What is this? And they might toe the line between satirical and I don't even know what else, but I'll read them to you, and you tell me if you've come across them, if you've seen them, and how if they're creating something just for clicks, or if they're trying to be funny, I guess. The first one is Quick Question. This is the title now. Quick Question. Are exhaust pipes the anuses of cars?
Wow.
And the other is about hot rod dogs, how to feature your dog, or how your pet can be featured.
The first one, the first thought that popped into my head was, whoever wrote that is not a car person. So right away, there's nothing there for me to read. Now if you want to, I don't, and unfortunately, if it turns out to have some value as a story, then shame on you for using such a terrible lead.
It does not.
Title. That's just awful. I see no value, zero value. It's got zero content value, 0 calories. The second one, what was it again?
Let me pick it up here. It's hot rod dog.
Hot rod dog.
How your favorite pet can be featured.
When I first saw it, I know which one. I know what you're referencing. It was obvious that was a way to bring in peripheral people, right? And I've heard that that's an approach that company wants to do, and it's coming from the top down, and that's far less offensive.
Yeah, I agree. But
borderline acceptable, but because what it does is it takes it away. It's but then okay, what just popped into my head too was, but on the other hand, I was the editor of Hot Rod Magazine when for 5 years we did the annual April swimsuit issue, which has nothing to do with cars, So, and I'm guilty, 100% guilty. It was not originally my idea. That's not my way out from underneath it. I got all the credit. There's a quick story behind this. Pat Ganal, give him credit for it. He was the editor of Hot Rod, and he went to the company and said, "I think let's spoof the swimsuit issue that SI is doing." Yeah. And they said no. Well, he did it anyway. And so we'll skip over all the interim stuff. I'm now the editor when that book hits the title or hits the stands. And to their chagrin, it was for about 10 seconds. It was wildly successful. Yeah. And immediately they said, do this every year. They wanted me to do it twice a year, and I refused.
Oh, wow.
But okay. So the dogs and Hot Rod and the swimsuit, well, that's really two sides of the same coin.
I hear you.
There's no difference. There's no head and tails there. They're both heads. Right. So So yes, we were guilty of it too. I'd like to think it was far more sophisticated. So, okay. Just toss that out there. Do with it what you will.
Well, you know what? That's the mark of someone with true integrity. I mean, you didn't have to tell that story, but if you can find similarity in something that I respect that. But
I guess I would much rather see something that I would learn from. But since I'm a tech guy, so the technical side of it is always the part that I want to push up towards the top. But it's probably not even half of our industry.
Right.
It probably isn't. It's probably
a huge culture. Yeah. The culture is a big part of it.
It's huge where people, because I have friends, I just want to be involved. I want to show up in my little hot rod, whatever it is, and hang out, and I'll suffer through the technical conversations that all you guys want to talk about all the time. I really don't care. And if I have a problem with my hot rod, I take it to somebody, they fix it for me, and I jump back in and I drive it and I have fun. Fantastic, wonderful. I would love to see you be more sophisticated and learn more about your own car. But if you don't, that's okay. There are no rules. There are no rules. NASCAR put lights under their race cars. Oh my God. But
Fast and the Furious.
So clearly there are no rules. I don't know if there was a reason for that other than trying to attract 10-year-old boys, which, okay, that's fine. If you're going to bring in a whole new level and you're going to put lights under the cars and that gets people excited, okay. I'm not sure I want to watch NASCAR anymore if that's the case.
Oh man, now I'm going to have to take them off my Firebird.
The whole other thing. So, I think they're just trying things, right? Let's just try this. And if there's a hue and cry, or it could be that they did that to deflect away from that whole political thing that was going on with flags and things like that. That could easily be part of the
real quick, you just brought up politics, and actually, you know what? I'm willing to own this. I will put my face on this. You said bringing other things into the industry, and we're talking journalistic integrity here. What's your opinion on politics in our hobby? Because let me tell you where I've come in. Where I feel. I was once told, and I'm sorry, if you remember who told me this, and I don't remember who you are. Somebody said you should go your entire career without anybody ever knowing your politics. That's how I feel. But I've noticed that there are a lot of politics coming into our hobby. And I want to know what you feel about it. I've already just laid it out there that I want my escape to be an escape and leave it all out of it. But
yes, I 100% agree with that. But I will tell you that I threw in a comment one time in one story that I can think of. There's probably others, but I've probably only done it. I can only think of one time. Let's put it that way. And I got response from it, both mostly negative. And I thought that was just stupid. I should have, and quite frankly, should never have allowed it in, So, yes, because Facebook has exploded to the point where I've defriended a bunch of friends because I don't want to listen to it. I just don't want to listen to it, and maybe that makes me, put blinders on, narrow-minded a little bit, maybe, but they're not going to convince me because these ideas are so radical. Sorry, maybe that makes me an old crotchety old guy. Okay. It is what it is. I don't yell at people, get off my lawn. Lawn, it's dead. It's all weeds. So walk on all you want. But it's because all it does is because essentially what it does, I just saw something on Facebook that really made a lot of sense. It creates divisions, and that's not what we're trying to do. If anything, what we're trying to do is we it's the unwritten kind of concept that we want to expand this to bring in more people into this, because the more people that come into this, the more different ideas we get, and it seems to be better. So we want to be inclusive, not exclusive. But if you bring politics into it, it's going to be exclusive or divisional.
What about when politics kind of interjects, and you, as the editor, I mean, I've published one op-ed that had to do with politics, and it was California legislation that was passing about exhaust law. Jeff, I'm sure you, it was like
the dB level. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And so I commented on it, and I thought it was BS, and and the comment section was resounding, like they were all in agreement. There was a few naysayers who say, I like a quiet exhaust, and that's fine. But at what point do you say something, or do you never say anything?
Well, I think if they're creating laws that exclude our sport hobby,
right?
Then you need to fight the fight.
Obviously, be informative and say, hey, this is what the law says. That's the stance I took. I want to
bring the facts again. Like I said earlier, don't tell me what I should be thinking. Present the information to me, and then let me make the decision. So to enact a law that says by 2035 we're going to have no internal combustion engines sold in the state of California, that's just short-sighted in my opinion. But so if you were to ever do a story about that, and it's not a law, it's more intent, right? This is what we'd like to be. Okay, but have you thought about this? So if you're going to have, that's not to exclude internal combustion engines on the roads, but just to not allow them to be sold.
Right.
So, and that, in a very small point, is actually happening. A friend of mine wanted to have these containers moved to his some land that he bought out in the desert, and the guy that he contacted, who was a shipping company, contacted him and said, "Could you do this for me?" And he's a mover, and he said, "I can't right now." Well, why can't you? Well, I haven't bought a new truck. I have to buy a new big diesel truck because my old one, I can't afford it, and the state will not allow me to re-up my registration. They're physically not gonna allow me to register this vehicle in the state of California.
Wow.
I mean, I was shocked by that, but apparently the diesel guys know all about it. Like, oh yeah, that's what, and they're just doing it. They don't care, That now their concept is to be fair to that concept is it's particulate emissions, and these are big giant trucks that are not being they're excluded from those particulate emission standards. I guess.
Right.
I know very little about diesels, but that's the concept. So that's dangerous, or like that concept for a while, the feds said, you can't turn a streetcar into a race car. You can't do that, and that had serious implications. I understand that that's been rescinded now, but those are serious implications, and how little the people in Washington know about what we do, which is why you've got SEMA there with our own lobbyists and to protect our interests.
Exactly.
It's not to make everyone think like us. I did a column one time for Hot Rod way long time ago. It's like, no, I want a bunch of people to drive Priuses and little tiny cars with 4-cylinder engines that get 60 miles per gallon. I want you to drive those little appliances on the road. And I mentioned that to somebody, and they went, why? Because that leaves more gas for the rest of us. And the air will be cleaner as a result. So everybody wins, because not everyone's going to be a hot rodder.
Right.
That probably is just as well. But, don't then turn around and say, well, no, you must drive this car to think like us.
Right.
No, this is still a free country. And,
yeah, I totally agree.
And the cleaner the air gets, the less impact our performance engines will have on that, because, quite frankly, you can't have performance without emissions. You can minimize it, which is what look at where we're at. My God, Hellcat engines and Elephants and that are making these enormous power levels and still pass federal emissions. It's astonishing. It's compared to where I was, when I came in in the mid '80s, it was the early '80s. Oh, it was just the depths of terribleness. It was just awful.
Well,
no performance cars. The Corvette had a 215 horsepower engine, something like that. It was just
that's like a slap in the face. Good Lord.
Yeah.
I
and now here we are. Here we are looking at they're built. I'm thinking, where is this going to stop? I think it's great. I love to have one, but yikes,
I'm excited for the future, not just of the internal combustion engine, which I do believe has a fruitful future ahead of it.
Absolutely.
But also for like electric cars and stuff. I'm not opposed to them. I think it's cool. I want to learn more about them.
I wanted to build one for a while. I wanted to build essentially an electric drag race S10.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, because it was just so intriguing. And so started asking my friends, and unanimous decision was no, don't do that.
There's a lot of pushback on them. And
the closest I got was an electric performance car story in Hot Rod Magazine, which went out there, put it out there, and I thought, okay, this will start the debate, right? Crickets. Nobody cared. So I thought, okay.
Yeah. Well, that was probably
for letting me do it. Yeah.
That was probably before you had Tesla's keeping up with Hellcats.
Yeah, that was about a year ago. So that it was essentially formed around that Copo the e-Copo Camaro.
Yeah, the e-Copo Camaro. That thing's awesome.
And I see now where Chrysler has built one. And well, we're faster than e-Copo. It's like, well, if you read my story, because I learned this, I didn't understand it. I thought, this car should be quicker than this. And they built it. The concept was to build a Camaro as if it would be a stock eliminator electric car. So they built it with essentially the horsepower of a typical Copo, like a 5.3 and a motor. Okay, well, then that makes perfect sense, And what the spinoff of that was, if there was going to be any conversation, was like, let's talk to NHRA about, do you have any plans to do electric car, stock eliminator class? And I know the answer would be, it'd be a unanimous no.
Yeah, exactly.
The difficult part would be, how do you equate this power to this power with instantaneous torque to this horsepower? It's not. Do
you think that we'll see that change here in the future?
I think so, only just because it adds something new. Because the drag racing's kind of stuck in this little,
I mean, you go to car meets now. Like, there's been the quarantine cruise that's gone on for a few times now. I don't know if you've heard of it out in Huntington Beach, but I've been to a couple of them, and there's Teslas out there. I mean, they're electric hot rods, or people turn them into. So,
11-second cars. It's amazing. Yeah.
But
I just love the instantaneous torque. That's the part. And what was interesting about the e-Copo Camaro was, the guy that built it said, essentially, the closer they did the drivetrain to a gasoline car, the quicker it went. So they did a torque converter and a transmission. And when they did that, it went a lot quicker.
I wonder how that equates when you talk about a manual trans, because that Mustang Lithium that was at SEMA last year had a 6-speed attached to it. And I don't know too much about it. Do you know anything, Greg?
I mean, I just know what was at SEMA, and that it had a 6-speed, and I honestly don't know how much of that was performance and how much was just trying driver engagement. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Just hey, look at this thing that we can maybe make.
Because I'm not going to lie, that 6-speed in an electric car made an electric car actually, made me pause for a second and go, maybe I would.
Yeah.
I mean,
the concept, the electric motor guys will say, you don't need a transmission,
Yeah.
And if you have a long, because you have instantaneous torque, but the other side of it is, you need that engagement with the driver, that manual tactile feel,
right?
Because you've lost the auditory part of it. It's not going to be loud. It's not going to be. It's not going to vibrate. It's not going to shake. It's not going to make noise. So, yeah, that could be what brings that the tactile part of it back into it. Because otherwise, a lot of my friends said the performance is there, but there's just no soul.
Right.
Which is a great comment. There's no soul, and that's because their what their meaning is that the soul is coming from the sound and the
of course,
the vibration and the noise and all that,
the smell, everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Love to race gas in the morning, that kind of thing.
Well, we've gotten a little bit off track, but that's all right. We're talking about the future of hot rodding, sort of. But I'm curious, Jeff. You mentioned some people earlier, but throughout your career, who are some people that come to mind who you respect their journalistic integrity, their thirst for knowledge, and their gratitude to the reader?
Well, first name pops into my head is Marlon Davis, as a tech writer. But there's been a lot of them, a lot of guys that put Gray Baskerville, he put his whole heart and soul into that thing, and Bonneville was his thing, but he added an enthusiasm to it. I can remember having a copy editor storm into my office and saying, with some of Gray's copy, and going, this is not even a word. It's like, you're right, it isn't. Well, we have to take it out. No, don't touch that. That's Gray Baskerville. And of course, she didn't understand the whole, and got mad at me, and we argued, and this is nothing but a boys' club. Well, of course it is. We have a 99.7%, male audience. Yeah, it's a boys' club. If you don't like it, you should go work for Vogue. You should go work for a fashion magazine. This is not your place. But Baskerville is an icon, and so yeah, a lot of influence there, and again, really cared about the readership and wanted to bring his enthusiasm out to you, and he was one of those guys that had very definitely influenced me. And Marlon, just because you thought, if I'm going to have to be a tech writer, good Lord, I'm going to have to be at least that good, because he set the bar way up here, and right. I'm going to have to work hard just to get there, and then if I'm really good, maybe I can exceed, and everybody's got their talents, and that's his, so, and then guys like Jim McFarlane, who just has contributed so much to the industry beyond just becoming the editor of Hot Rod and then working for Edelbrock, and then he does all kinds of behind the scenes stuff with SEMA, and was heavily involved in that whole, and there's a whole big story around how those crate engines were integrated into being legal for California, like the
E-Rod.
The E-Rod thing. Yeah. There's a whole story behind that's interesting as hell. Because the state of California was going to come after, where the only way you were going to build a street rod in California was to build it with an emission legal engine, a completely emission. And that meant everything: fuel delivery system, exhaust system, full length exhaust. It doesn't matter if you run the 32 Ford and you're going to put a Coyote motor in it, going to have a complete Mustang exhaust system on it.
Why do they do this to us, Jeff? We've given them so much. And why do they do this to us?
Well, it's about control. The state is all about, and it's not just this state, it's every state, but this state especially, it's all about control. Once you give it to them, they're never going to let go.
Yeah. Jeff, I know that you
better stop there.
yeah, exactly. But Jeff, I know you made your bones, doing a lot of different things, but you are widely known as a tech guy. Do you think vehicle features are kind of fluffy? And I know that you've written some in the past, but was that by design or like a necessity?
Well, usually when I was working for the magazine, if I was on staff working for CarCraft or Doug Ladd, he'd give me a car features. Yeah, I can do that. But if I had to do it, every day, I would just, slice my wrist this way. I just couldn't do it. Just could not do it. Could I, if my livelihood depended on it? Sure. Do I want to? No. It's kind of funny. Pat Ganal, I ran into Pat Ganal. He's long since retired, and I ran into him. This is 3 or 4 years ago, and he said, "So you freelancing still?" I said, "Yeah." So features. I went, "Oh God, no." And he looked at me like, "Well, that leaves tech." I went, "Well, yeah, of course." He goes, "Why?" because it's fun. It's a challenge. He goes, "Oh my God, no, it's so hard." I said, "It's a lot easier than writing car features, though, Pat." So it's all what you're into. Because he's the kind of guy that's really into the culture and the people and the style and that kind of stuff. He can do tech stuff. He's very, very good at it, and has done. He wrote a couple of books for Essay Design that were they're still reference books. I use them all the time. So he could do both. He's a multi-talented guy. but just chose to do the feature side, and that's okay. It's just whatever you're into. But it just evolved into the tech thing. I think because when I first got to CarCraft, there were more feature writers on staff than there were tech.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well then I'll just write tech because that makes me more valuable. And,
exactly.
And I could do both. Whereas the feature guys oftentimes could not do the tech, so you couldn't swing the boat, the other way around.
That remains true.
Tried it by the stern because it wouldn't work. So, and so I thought, okay, that makes me more valuable. So that I just, buckled down and had to learn, and it was hard. It was really hard, because it's, when you do things and everything is interrelated, so like a valve train is not just push rods, it's the whole valve train. The same thing with the entire car. Everything is interrelated to everything else. And eventually, and that's the hard part is understanding that.
Jeff, throughout your career, you've, and I know you might laugh at this, but you've discovered and uncovered a lot of information, right? From helping coin the term pro touring, to deep technical dives into carburetor theory, and seemingly everything in between. What are some articles you're most proud of, or what pieces of editorial come to mind when I bring that up? And we might end there.
The pro touring thing with Mark Stilo, that was fun because we had a chance to be there. A lot of people think that we created that, and we didn't. Mark had been building those kinds of cars for years, and we were on Power Tour together, and we were talking about it. And I said, because he was, I want to see this really be something. And I said, well, how it becomes a movement is you have to have a term for it, And he goes, what do you mean? I said, well, it's like pro street. Everybody, when you say pro street, everybody knows what you're talking about. So you don't have to explain it, because if you have to explain it, it gets too involved and people's eyes glaze over. So I said it needs a term. And then the conversation moved on to other things. And then literally a week, 2 weeks later, he calls me on the phone. I got the term. I know what it is. And I went, what are you talking about? And he said, remember that discussion we had in the car? Yeah, pro touring. And it's like, oh my God, yeah. So threw it out there I was editor of Chevy High at the time. We tossed it out there. It didn't do particularly well, right? And so then when I came 6 months later, wanted to do it again, management said no. It's like, no, you don't understand. We're on the tidal wave has already started, and we're right here. We're on the leading edge of this thing. You've got to let me do this. And it's like, no. And it's like, you don't understand. You hire me to be out there, and we're there, and let us lead the charge. And it was like, and essentially it they relented and let me do it, and it still didn't do well. And it's like we're building the foundation, and eventually we're going to have this wonderful house, but you got to let me build the foundation for it. And the kicker was when Popular Hot Rodding, our competition, did G machines, and I went, we've arrived. They just won't use our term. That's okay. Less about ego, less about us, less about the term that the Peterson title created. It's more about the movement, because clearly they see it too. So they just call it something else. And you don't hear much about G machines anymore, but so that was one thing. I've seen Hot Rod now use Dare to Be Different 4 or 5 times. And that was something that I won't say I came up with. It was a term that the staff came up. We came up with probably in a staff meeting, and we're looking for that title, right? And it's like, because that's when all the weird 50 bullet nose Studebakers and Metros, the old 50 Metros, all that weird stuff that was happening, where cars like I did a column about it. It was like cars that when we were kids thought they were stupid cars are now cool. The Rambler wagons. And and station wagons, and just because what was happening was the street rodders are looking for something different than a red 32 Ford Roadster. So we're kicking this around. We're all on board. Everybody's yeah. But how do we how do we encapsulate this? And somebody probably said, well, we got to be different. And somebody else said, we got to be Dare to Be Different. It's like, yeah, there you go. Bang, bam, boom, done. And Hot Rod has used that several times. So it's like, so we contributed that. And yeah, it's more you'd like to think that we pushed the whole sport, hobby, whatever you want to call it, forward, as opposed to just kind of just coasting along. No, we pushed it forward, and it was a lot of fun. That was the best part of it, and I think it's kind of like when you get two actors on the screen and you can feel that connection that they have, and you can't put a word to it. You don't understand, but you do understand that they're there, and you've suspended disbelief, and you've bought that they're acting this whole scene out, and it's working, and it's magical. And I'd like to think that that's what was happening when we were on staff at Hot Rod, especially during the late 80s and early 90s, that it was just a lot of fun. It was just a tremendous amount of fun where you didn't want to go home, where you look at it and go, man, it's 8 o'clock. I should probably get home before my kids go to bed, so they can see me before I leave in the morning before they get up, and it's like, Mommy, who's that guy over here at the other end of the table? And that's your father, that kind of thing. So that was the price we paid for that, But,
Jeff, I think I can speak for a lot of people when I say that I'm appreciative of everything that you've done so far. I mean, I can pick up the phone and you'll answer, thankfully, and you've helped me out of a jam more than once now, and I'm very appreciative of it. It's, it's not difficult to see why they're still tapping some wells that you dug.
Yeah. It was just a lot of fun. So it's fun to look back at it and go, yeah, we were there, and we could be remembered for certain things that we did. There's a whole thing with Cadzilla that there's a whole story around that's fun to talk about, because it almost,
Jeff?
Well, just real quickly, that cover almost didn't happen. Real quickly. So for those who may not know what Cadzilla is, 48 Cadillac sedan that Boyd Coddington turned into this piece of sculpture, really, for the boys at ZZ Top. And so Gray Bastard followed the thing all the way along. We had multiple silver. Now we're ready to do the cover because the car is done. And it's a dark purple. So this is a custom Cadillac. Imagine a custom Cadillac on the cover of Hot Rod magazine that is essentially black in the image. And we decided to use the rear 3/4 image, which you don't do.
Right,
There's an unwritten rule. Don't put the butt of the car on the cover. Turn it around, face it at, so it's coming at you. It's active. And we thought the back of the car was the dramatic statement. So
Cadillac,
Randy Lawrenson shot it for us. Did a spectacular job. There was a 4-page centerfold, maybe only 3-page centerfold, with a scene that he created in the studio. It was amazing. Fire coming out of a 55-gallon drum, and it looks like it was shot inside of a sewer. And what it was a backdrop, a painted backdrop that already existed. It was from the movie Spaceballs.
Oh, wow.
We draped the backdrop.
I've seen that photo many times. I had no idea.
Yeah, and then built the set around it, and there's actually flame coming out of a 55-gallon drum. So, and then the boys, the Tres Hombres, right? So we get all done, got the cover, and it created such a furor within the company that we were summoned up to the 7th floor. That's when we were still on 8490 Sunset. And the 7th floor was Mr. Peterson's, and he wasn't there, but it was the president of the company, Mr. Waingro, and it was a rectangular table, so you can tell right away what's going to happen here. So the circulation department is on that side of the table, and the editorial side is on this side. And so I got my publisher, Harry Hibbler, our group publisher, John Diana, and myself, and the whole other side of the table is filled up with all kinds of people that hate this cover. They despise it. And so the meeting starts, except for one person, Lee Kelly, who had been the editor of Hot Rod magazine back in the 70s and early 80s, and was now, I'm pretty sure, either the editor or the publisher of Motor Trend. So guy with a horsepower. Why he was at this meeting, I don't know. But circulation must have invited him, or somebody did. But he wasn't sitting on our side of the table. He was editorial guy, but he was on the other side of the table. I'm going, yikes, this is good. And they launch into, this is a horrible, this is all black, you can't see anything. It's the back end of a custom Cadillac on the cover of Hot Rod magazine. You cannot do this. And then we launched into why this was going to be wildly successful. You have to trust us. You hired me to do something, and we've done it. And we have all this time. I want to tell them how much money we spend on this shoot. Thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. I've repressed that number because it ate up an enormous part of my budget, but it was worth it. We knew it was worth it. So I said, here's the roll of dice. Let's go. And now here's the management team at Peterson telling me, no, you can't do this. So it's going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and it's a stalemate. We're not backing down. And my publisher's with me. Harry is backing me 100%. John Diana, we don't want to speak ill of the dead, but he's since passed away. But he was a group publisher. He was a very political person. And so he was staying silent because no decision had been made yet. And, so he's being the consummate, politician, and is only going to side once the wave has turned one way or the other, right? And he doesn't want to side with circulation because that's just going to sour our relationship, which also wasn't very good to begin with because he did this so often. So anyway, it's back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And the president is sitting over here at the far end of the table. And finally he says, hey, Lee Kelly, this has been going on now for 15, 20 minutes. We're not getting anywhere. You've not said anything. So I would like, because he obviously trusted Lee. And he said, you really haven't said anything. So how do you feel about this? And Lee just said, to my everlasting gratitude, said, I think you should let him run with this. I think this is an okay cover. Yes, it violates all the rules. Sometimes you have to take the rule book, throw it out, because there are no rules really, and if we always stay in this cookie cutter form, this book is never going to grow. So let him take the risk. And then immediately John Diana goes, yeah, I agree, because he saw the wind change, right?
Right.
And so that was it. So the president of the company looked at circulation and said, well, sounds like we have a decision. And they said, you will live to regret this. Looked at me, said, you will live to regret this.
Whoa.
He'd like to be showed up, right? Circulation. He liked to think that he ran the magazine side. He didn't, but he liked to think so. Nigel Heaton was his name. And then, so to put the capper on this, it goes out now in the magazine business, in the actual printed magazine business. What you did was you lived and died by your newsstand numbers. So the newsstand numbers would come in, early numbers would come in, and generally, if you were doing well, they would come in from selected sites throughout the country, like Chicago and Los Angeles and Denver and other places where we sold well, Midwest. And then if your numbers were trending good, then you knew your numbers would grow. And if your trending numbers were down, they were going to come in and chop your head off. And so the numbers hadn't come in yet, and then all of a sudden the numbers came in and they were off the charts. I mean, because it attracted a lot of peripheral people because it was ZZ Top.
Right.
We brought in some rock and roll people too, who peripherally appreciated cars. It was like, hey, ZZ Top's built a car. Let's take a look at this. I'll buy a copy of Hot Rod magazine. And the capper was, you may be too young for this, but when MTV first got started, they had this little segment on once a day, and it was called MTV News. And a guy named Kurt Lauder would stand in a black studio with the world spinning around behind him, right over his right shoulder, and it was just some little digital image of the world spinning like this. And I came home from one day, and our book had been out by that time. The title was out, and I'm channel flipping. And all of a sudden, I stop on MTV News, and Kurt Lauder goes, "Oh, ZZ Top is on the cover of Hot Rod magazine," and I'm like, I'm trying to get a VHS into the mind. This is how long trying to get a VHS in the machine to get it recorded before he goes off. It was only about 7, 8, 10 seconds long, and it was gone. And and no one, the rest of the company saw it but me. And so, of course, no one believed me. So somewhere, archived somewhere in some little cubbyhole somewhere, is this little snippet of Hot Rod Magazine on MTV. And
we got to try and find that.
It sold like crazy, and it just exploded, and it helped a lot of credibility, but it was a risk, absolutely, And for people who didn't understand what that car was and how impactful it was, and that was a totally feature thing. I could have never done anything technical that could have generated that kind of enthusiasm.
Right.
It would be kind of like Hot Rod's version of the Apollo launch, just to go back to where we started. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Thank
you so much for sharing that with us. Yeah, man. I'm glad that you told us that story. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
I got lucky. It could have gone the other way, and then they would have put a bullet in my brain, and there would have been a new editor probably within a couple of weeks. But it did, and we trusted it. We knew it was going to work. We just didn't know how well, So,
man, that's awesome. We're gonna hunt some images of that. We're gonna hunt some photos of that, and we'll put them up when this thing airs.
Yeah. It would take me a few minutes to find it. I think it was 88 or 89. Not sure. That's a guess. I was editor from 87 to 93.
89. That was the year I was born.
Really? Tells you how old I am.
No, I appreciate your wealth of experience and knowledge, Jeff. And I really, from the bottom of my heart, man, I want to thank you for taking the time to speak to us, come on, and just shed some light on an issue that I think was worthwhile to discuss. This was a conversation that I've been waiting to have, and you were the right person to have it with. And again, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for inviting me. This has been fun.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, the illustrious Jeff Smith, man. I feel grateful to have him on and to be able to spend this much time picking his brain. I don't know many people who have that opportunity, but I, for one, am grateful. He hit the nail on the head for a lot of the questions that I asked him. You can really tell that he's speaking from a lifelong career in this, like a passion and just so much experience. Because some of the things that he mentioned from his past, we're still dealing with today, Greg. And I know as an editor, you can attest to that.
Yeah, and I think I want to really harp on something. You said his lifelong career.
Yeah.
Jeff has been doing this professionally longer than either one of us has been alive.
I know, dude.
And and that's not like, I'm not talking crap about how old he is. His knowledge. He was doing this. He's talking about Sunset. I can remember going to Sunset with my grandma so I probably walked by his office. Well, I was probably pushed in a stroller by his office. And he's probably, he was in there toiling away on something,
He was getting cars on the cover of Hot Rod, on MTV News when I was in diapers, bro. It's, he's seen and done it all. There have been a couple times where I call him up and I need to tap into his expertise. And before I can even finish my question, he's already answering it and telling me, this is what you need to do. So to have him on and talk about something that's not exactly pointed in a technical direction, but to talk about something that we deal with on a daily basis, and that's our journalistic integrity. It was awesome, man. It was awesome to get his insight.
And one thing that just, journalistic integrity is a hot button topic with me. And I would say I have a pretty thick skin, except about that. If somebody, questions my integrity, I probably am more likely to respond in a way that I shouldn't. Because I've been doing this coming up, I'm entering my 17th year. I've never intentionally, put something out there. Nobody has ever bought my opinion.
Right.
And to have that ever poked at really is a button.
Well, you know what? That's a big part of what we do, right? We work with manufacturers and we test their products, and so we owe our readers to be honest. But also, a part of this now that's come about since things are digital and opinions are just rampant. There's also there's digital periodicals, if you will, that are out there that that market themselves as an authoritative automotive voice or a journal or whatever you want to call it, and they're publishing things that are, some would argue, satirical. I would argue are just clickbait. And so that was like a big inspiration for this conversation.
Yeah, and to me, it seems such a simple equation. Be honest, to your reader, and don't say stuff just to get a rise. Right. It seems easy to be, legitimate. I don't know. I mean, sure, those titles and those publications, if they want to be, satire and it happens to revolve around a car, that's their market. Cool. I don't particularly care to be compared to them.
Right. They're muddying those waters.
Yeah. I mean, I do my thing.
But that's what we can do, right? That's what we can do. We can publish things that are relevant and informative, educational, and entertaining. And that's our guiding light, at least mine.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, the way I create my editorial plans, I want to know if it's something that's cool to me, and I assume it's going to be cool to everybody. You know what I mean? Like generally, if I'm writing an article about something, it's because I found it cool. I wanted to know more about it, or I think it, I've specifically thought this will help somebody. I've never thought about crafting an article simply to sell something, or to, and I know a lot of people, will accuse us of that. And, like Jeff, touched on, there's always, we're a business at the end of the day, but our integrity, and that's, I think I can say this for our entire company, our integrity is number one.
Right.
Because
you can't sell that journalistic soul. You know?
And the second you do, it's gone. You never get it back. If you sell your integrity, it's gone.
Well, not to beat a dead horse, but yeah, I agree with Jeff.
Yes.
So, Greg, before we wrap up, what do you got going on at Engine Labs, man? What can our audience look forward to this week or the coming week?
Well, the tomorrow, today, sorry, right now, magazine time. There is a cool article coming out on valve springs from Urson. It's a video. Pretty cool deal. Basically, walk away from it asking more questions than are answered. But that's the point of it, to make you understand that you can't watch a 4-minute video and all of a sudden know exactly which valve springs to pick.
Right.
And again, that kind of article, that whole article is meant to make you think, not to give you answers.
Right.
So I know there's probably going to be some aggravated people that say, you didn't say anything in that. Well, we got
do something for yourself, people.
Yeah, if we get you to think.
Feed you.
Well, yeah, I mean, but that's the thing. Valve springs, there is no, I mean, I don't know, in the LS world, there's probably 6 or 7 part numbers for the entire 95% of the LS market, that work.
Right.
But I mean, for the most part, you have to, pick your valve spring based on your particular application.
Cool, man.
But yeah, there's that, and that's going to be cool.
Everybody go check out enginelabs.com. Check out that article from Greg. Street Muscle, this week, really cool article that we have going up is a feature on a little bit of an oddball car. It's a Pontiac Ventura. So really beautiful car. If you guys know what those cars are, it's an offshoot of the Chevy Nova, kind of like the Buick Apollo or the Oldsmobile Omega. So yeah, check it out. It's a pretty cool feature. And then of course we have tech and everything else that we were talking about with Jeff just a moment ago. So head over to streetmusclemag.com, head over to enginelabs.com, powerautomedia.com. Check out our YouTube channel, check out our Facebooks, and we'll see you next week, noon Pacific time. Peace.
Adios.